How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk Live. You know what I hate about going on live is that it takes a while to get it out to everyone. So that whole excited intro goes out to no one except for when it's on the replay. So, but by the way, guys, it's pretty exciting. We're going to do another Tier Talk Live. I have Russ Hamilton coming on, and we may have Joe Paponio. He's going to try to figure if he can get on tonight, but if not, it'll be me and Russ, and we'll answer any questions that you guys may have, which is pretty cool. But in the meantime, before we start the show, let you guys know I have Inmate Manipulation Decoded. This is a book that's now available, used for training all across the country. So thank you guys for the constant support. This book, the link to this book is in the description. I also have How to Succeed in Corrections. This book is available through Blue 360 Media. A link to that is in the description, guys. There's just tons of advice in this book, man. It's not just from me, but from other professionals in the field. So if you're looking to navigate a successful career in corrections, you got to get your hands on this book, from the leadership to tactical. And then, guys, I'm excited for this. The link for the pre-orders are ready. I have another book coming out. This is for actually, I have a picture of it right here. What am I doing? There it is. Tips for new correctional officers and their supervisors. This book right here is going to add very well. It's got about another 46 or 47 more tips that will add very well to the other two books on the market. And that book is also available on Blue 360 Media, but it's pre-order. It will be due out the end of February. But if you do the pre-order now, you may get the book a little bit sooner. That book's going to partner very well, as I mentioned. And then I'm working on a daily reader. The daily reader is going to be produced by published by the same company, Blue 360 Media. But it's going to be a small little book, but it's going to have like a nice little message or advice or tips, whatever it is, for each day of the year. It's something you can hold on to. And the reason why I do these books, guys, in case you don't realize, they're discussion worthy. You know, so basically you get a little tip from here, you read it, and then you discuss it. And that's sort of what we're doing with this new book here. And then eventually when I have that daily reader, which I'm working on, which is I'm trying to get 365 topics that I haven't touched on or that I can revisit with another perspective. And it's not that easy, but I'm finishing up the month of January, and then I send it over to the publisher. They clean it up, and then I start working on February. So I'm hoping to have that book out soon. And also I'm trying to get a lot of people to get involved in that book. But again, I still have to have the topic. So even if I go to look for a quote, I still need to know what the topic is. So I've covered so much in doing Tier Talk and doing these books. Trying to come up with the topics is difficult. But since I'm in the field, though, I kind of live through a moment, then I get some insight, and the next thing you know, I'm creating a topic, which is pretty cool. So let's get Russ on. What's up, Russ?
Hey, how's it going, Anthony?
Good. Russ, do you mind introducing yourself to our audience, please?
Of course not. My name is Russ Hamilton. I am a former and retired sergeant from California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. I've also worked as a senior juvenile correctional officer for a local juvenile facility here. I currently work for a private company where we do reentry and rehabilitation work with inmates at the county jail, where I'm a case manager, and for a local probation department. And I'm currently, one of the contributors at Tier Talk. And I also run a Facebook page called Keepers of Chaos with a K, where we really work to support the professional aspects of the field that we're in.
Yes, and that group is amazing, guys. If you get a chance and you work in corrections, you definitely want to get onto that Facebook page, because there's just mentors there, people that have worked in the profession, people that work currently in the profession, and the advice there is just spot on. I wish that was something that we had coming in. Hey, guys, I want to give you a full circle moment before we start getting into the dialogue and answer people's questions. Someone says your videos are a big help. Thank you. And thank you for the support. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate that. That's why me and Russ do what we do. I'm going to give you a full circle moment before we do the live Q&A. And then I also want to ask Russ about his thoughts about what happened in California, and then provide some tips for those that are actually working in those centralized areas like yard or mess. because in some states you actually still have individuals who have to walk inside those yards or walk inside those mess halls, very direct supervision. But there's a lot of states, a lot of agencies that have done away with that for safety reasons. But if you're an agency that's still doing it, Russ is definitely the man that can give you some advice, because Russ, you know, it's old school corrections. But before I want to give you a full circle moment real quick. And I think it's time. Oh, hey, what's up, Ralph? I think it's time to share this story with Russ, because, you know, Russ is on the softer side of corrections now. Russ is on rehabilitation side. But can I give you just a great moment I had the other day? And it's just unique, guys. And I kind of want to share it. So, you know, I'm in administration. I won't give out any names or anything like that, but I oversee releases. And, you know, I sign off once their time is done or they're up for parole, whatever it is. I sign off on their releases. You know, we go through a whole committee. They do most of the hard work. And my job is just very surface. If I have any questions, they're there to answer it. And then once all the T's are crossed, I's are dotted, you go ahead and you sign the release. That means either person has either completed their time, you know, they're done, or maybe they're going out for parole. So as I'm doing the releases, we do oversee a specific halfway house that oversees females. Now, mind you, guys, I started my career at a female facility as an officer. And as I get this person on release, I haven't seen this inmate since I left that facility in 2011. But I remember that inmate when they first came in to the system in 2004. So now, mind you, I started corrections in 2002. So I was still relatively new, a year or two on the job. And it was just such a full circle moment, because I remember when that inmate came in, that inmate was in my unit. Inmate was very respectful. I mean, in this case here, I mean, this was someone who did what she did, but really stepped up, you know, understood the consequences of her actions and took advantage of every program that was available, and I hope is going to have a good life, because as I said, I was signing out the max out paperwork. But then it got me to reminisce about something. This was over 20 years ago when I was the officer that was there when she came in. And who would think 20 years later I'd be the administrator person, or the administrative person signing her release? 20 years later, what it did was it caused me to look backwards, and I froze for a second. I think more so because of how much time has passed, where you kind of don't know how much time has really passed until it was in front of you. And the last time I dealt with this individual, they were in their 20s. Now they're in their 40s. And I'm like, well, shit, that means I'm in my 40s, because I was in my 20s back then. And, you know, it was a full circle moment. But I don't know. I mean, I think it was the passage of time that mattered, the fact that was over 20 years ago. And then just, you know, looking back at the moments, I truly enjoyed being an officer. I truly enjoyed the interactions I had with the population. You know, some great, you know, some a little bit more challenging. But for the people that just made me think about it right now, because as I said, I've been in administration now for almost a decade. But for the people that are on the floor right now, I don't know if you're going to realize it now, but enjoy the moments, because when you look back, they are moments of impact. I felt it. I literally felt it. So I thought I just wanted to share that. Oh, look, Russ, Don Spivey, he goes, I'm looking forward to the addition to your book, Lessons While Working in a Prison. Come on, end of the month. I love that's not my boy, Don. Yeah, it's right. So, Don, look, this is the printed out final draft. The book will be in your hand shortly. It's coming out February 29th. But last time, people that ordered it got it a little bit sooner. And then I'm working on a daily reader, but I'm only in the month of I'm finishing up the month of January. So that's going to be a little bit longer, because, again, you got to come up with 365 topics. Hey, Russ, I want to ask you a question. I want to kind of get into the discussion. So, guys, we're going to do a live Q&A. We'll answer all the questions that you got. But in the meantime, while we start building that momentum, Russ, there was an incident that happened in California recently. So I was hoping if I can get your input on this incident. It happened in a yard. And then, again, just kind of going back, is a lot of facilities, a lot of prisons, especially out in California, obviously, still have officers present doing centralized, like, as I said, yard, mess, And I was wondering if we can give some tips for those that still walk those yards or walk those active mess halls. So what happened in California, and then what will be some of the tips that you provide for people that have to walk those centralized areas?
Yeah, so this particular incident, the most recent one that we're talking about is the one that happened at Ironwood. And apparently what happened is they were getting ready to do a mass search of one of their buildings there. And during the mass search, one particular inmate apparently came to the attention of ISU. And I don't know if they were targeting him or they noticed his actions were funny, but I guess maybe they put him into bracelets. Every indication I had was that, yes, they had placed him into handcuffs. And they, at that point, were escorting him across the yard. During the escort, he tried to headbutt one of the people escorting him and tried to turn on them. And so while they were handling that and taking control of him, up to possibly 200 inmates decided to rush that escort team. This is typically what we see, from the Sereno factions that we have inside California prisons. You'll hear the term all the time. You get one bean, you get the whole burrito. That's where that comes from. So anyway, basically they had one of our Mini 14s fired a warning shot. And then multiple block guns were used to get the rest of that down. And then it devolved into a bunch of baton strikes and OC and everything else. They ended up having 7 officers went to outside hospitals for treatment. And I think 5 or 6 different inmates. Heard one of the inmates may have had to be life flighted. I don't have all of the particulars on that. So it's kind of a thing where I'm trying to say enough, but also not say too much at the same time, if you know what I mean.
Hey, sorry about that. My job called.
Oh, that's okay.
So let me get back. Yeah. So Russ, let me ask you a question, Russ. My biggest concerns right now is, I've talked in the past. I'm not a real big fan of walking those centralized areas. So guys, let me just explain what I mean by centralized areas. Basically you got your mess halls. Some facilities actually still have the officers walking in those mess halls severely outnumbered. Some actually have the officers walking in those active yards, or religious services could also be centralized. So I'm very used to where you're kind of at a safe distance. I'm not going to say it's direct observation because in comparison to what Russ is known to do, it's definitely not. But in my experience, it was, because you're just one level up looking down at everyone, but you're also safely removed from that. It's a very populated area, and that's where the officers and the inmates are the officers or the staff are severely outnumbered. But with that said, I'm very big on, if there's a concern, you can kind of see it through the camera, and then you can go ahead and have a more controlled response where in these type of centralized areas, when you're actively in it, when you're walking around like 8 officers to hundreds of inmates, it's very hard because you got to kind of pick and choose your battles. I mean, if so. So Russ, my thing is, I know you love the direct observation. You're old school, so I'm not going to go back and forth, because I see the reason to have both. Obviously, one, I'm more safety, but you're more got to get my hands on them immediately. But what would be some tips for those that are really walking those centralized areas?
So yeah, the main one really that it comes down to is situational awareness. You have to be aware of where the inmates are, where you are, where your partner is. In a lot of places that I worked, was lucky enough to have overhead, at least at times. And if you guys aren't familiar with overhead, is we always had lethal option overhead, working, in towers, wall posts, things like that. One of my early on assignments was I worked the chow hall at San Quentin, and that was intense because first rattle out of the box every morning. It was all about we're feeding extended term inmates that were coming in. And the next thing we were doing is we were feeding, back then it was called Category J. Now they're triple CMS. And those are guys that are taking really heavy duty psychotropic medications. So they're crazy. And then, then it was just, a whole mill of different guys in there. And I would see thousands and thousands and thousands of these guys. And the one thing that was really, truly helpful was we had, that gun overhead. And back then it was the H&K Model 94. That's how far this goes back, which, is a 9mm carbine. And so we always had that as our backup. Most of the time, though, we were down to using, back then, this was before chemical agents came along and were in wide use. So basically we had, our baton in our hands and that was about it. So knowing where everything is, knowing where your overhead is, if you have it, is key. Staying close to your partner and always having, planned out in your head ahead of time where the escape routes are, where you can get to safely, and how you can let people know if you start to get in trouble with your, hopefully you have a radio, hopefully you have a personal alarm device, whatever it is, and knowing where your backup is going to be coming from and to is really important as well. I've been in some very sketchy situations in some of those dining rooms. And, that didn't end at San Quentin. I've spent lots of times in other dining halls, other facilities. And it was, there were many touch and go situations. And at one point we lost the overhead in the dining hall at San Quentin. And that was really bad. Guns could still get in there, but it was one of those things where it took a little bit of time. So, breaking it down, things that you're going to do on a yard, things that you're going to do in a dining hall like that, stay with your partner. Don't bite off more than you can chew. If it starts to turn into a situation where, things are going to go bad, we used to have this expression, and Johnny Ray out there has a brand new book called Yard Down. And that's what we would say. Yeah. And we would say, hey, Tower 5, put the yard down. And everyone knew right then that you had a situation. This is like, not necessarily a code that's going to happen, but almost certainly a code. But that was like the way we initiated everything. And so that meant that everybody that was left standing after we put the yard down was involved. And so, if they're not getting down, then they're involved and they're part of the people who were going to be putting the bracelets on in short order. And so that's how we would start, sorting people out and knowing where things were coming and going from. But don't bite off more than you can chew. Make sure you know where your help is coming from. Have an idea in your head of how long it's going to take to get there. And basically everything else, it's all this discretionary decision making, how much risk for how much reward. Sometimes you have to disengage. You can't always, be in there and expect that you're going to get some guy down on the ground and be able to cuff him peacefully. I had a situation at the very end of my career. Like within a couple of weeks, me and the sergeant, I'm not going to go into details on this one, but we ended up having to put a guy down hard in the dining room, and it went very, very sour. Everyone got up and rushed us. We were able to kind of like back up to the door a little bit, pulled everything, pulled all of our pepper spray, and we were ready to go. Had our batons out. We had people on the way, thank God. And for whatever reason, we were able to, get that door closed and then come back in with more staff. But, I very nearly took what could have been a fatal beating that day. And they would just, they were getting down and popping back up, but they weren't willing to risk, coming directly at that baton and directly at that spray for just a few seconds before we could, get back out that door. And, me knowing where people were was very instrumental in getting my ass out of that bad situation. But once again, it was all about that particular gang, that particular STG was just going to, go down swinging, all for one for all, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And, there's gentleman here at SVSP or Corcoran, we only have 2 officers in the chow hall. And it could be the same person that said, I think a lot of it stems in how much respect the inmates have for the seating officers in the chow hall. Hey, Russ, let me ask you a question, Russ, because we have a great question from Don Spivey, but before I get to that, I kind of want to stay on this topic just for a second. But obviously, I've never, well, you know what? Wait a second. That's not 100% true. Just a little bit different. I actually did walk active mess halls, but not like in your situation. But when I worked at the female facility, we did walk in the active mess hall for the min unit, not for the max. So definitely never walked into a medium or maximum mess hall. So I'm not familiar with that practice. Nor am I familiar with walking in an active centralized like mess hall yard for a for men. I've definitely we never patrolled yard. I'll tell you that I know of in my experience. But with that said, it is a moment where you're extremely vulnerable. You know, the numbers are against you. You know, I mean, I know you mentioned discretion, but how do you, basically have that level of authority, but then still may have to let things go because it's just not the time?
So that's one of the things, sometimes you just got to go back and get them later, and do it under a controlled circumstance where, you recognize the guy. Hopefully you're able to, ID him. If you're working that unit every day, sooner or later, you're going to see that guy again. And you can't just let things go because then they'll just continually, try and press you. But you have to go back and deal with it sometimes at a later point. That's not optimal. We tend to be, the type of beings, eyes up front. We're predators. So, we always want to deal with it right then, but it's just not always safe. It's not always advisable. And so you have to, do what you have to do in the moment. I get back to, once again, I had lots of those situations where things would start to go a little bit sideways. We'd step back and, call for them to put the yard down. And sometimes they'd get down and sometimes they wouldn't. And but that was always a great way to sort them out. We would stop all of that movement because sometimes there's just things there that you can't let slide. You can let some things slide, but not everything. And if you have a guy that's, getting ready to, get crazy, you can't just, let him continue on into the yard or whatever. I had a situation where it was just, this one guy, I had one of my officers test something that was found in his locker, and it wasn't even a substance, and this guy, he got so indignant about it. And, he just wouldn't leave the issue alone. And we locked everyone down. We did count. We let him out and we were back in the chow hall. And my officers called me and says, "Hey, this guy wants to come and talk to you." And I said, "No, absolutely not. He can talk to me after dinner or whatever." And then he got so flustered, he ran up and stabbed his cellie right in the neck, over nothing, over a test. That we did on a substance that he actually didn't have at the time. And so the idea is that he was going to catch me flat-footed and stick that thing in my neck. And so those places where that amount of churn and activity is going on, it's really dangerous. At that point in that particular chow hall, much like at those places that we just mentioned, Sadaf, and what was the other one? Corcoran. Their chow halls have overhead. And so, I was lucky in that circumstance, but you just have to be, eyes in the back of your head all the time. There's nothing that you can take for granted.
I'm looking at William. Hey, William, do me a favor. It says my class at North Carolina Department of Corrections used one of his stories in our class about females working in corrections. Which video is that, out of curiosity? Is that because did I do a video on females in corrections, or was that you, Russ?
We did one together way back when, but we've done so many videos.
We're over 1,500, I think.
Yeah, and so I mean that could have involved a lot of differentiating topics. Maybe it was not just females. I know at one point we did one where we were talking about the importance of being on the same page and not tolerating disrespect toward females from officers, and we get back to that, all for one for all kind of scenario. But, I didn't tolerate that with, on any of the yards I worked as a sergeant. That was not going to happen. We would be up in inmates' business over saying stupid stuff to our female staff that was, sexually inappropriate and whatnot.
All right. And then, guys, just want to say congrats to congrats to Steve, watching here in Canada. Been following you for a few months now. I really appreciate the experience and perspective shared here. I'm in the process to become a federal CO, start training in May. Congratulations.
Good job.
That's pretty awesome. And then, okay, so we're going to get to Edgar Flores' question. I want to get to Don first. So, Edgar, I'm going to start your question up. I'll get to you. But let's get to Don. Let's get to Don real quick. I'll start with this one. So Don says, what would you say is the best way besides time with learning the job for the new boots to learning their position of authority? What's funny is when I first started corrections, the big thing for us was you got to chase conflict. I actually have that in my new book, Don. There's a little passage coming out about chasing conflict. And basically you got to practice saying no. That's something that I think could be very uncomfortable at first. So you got to kind of practice saying no, which means that if inmates are doing something that they shouldn't be doing, and trust me, on day one, they will, especially with you as a rookie. It's no different than kids having a substitute teacher. You got to address it immediately. Now, granted, eventually you'll be able to employ some level of discretion as you move forward and gain more experience. But at the very beginning, you got to create a very strong foundation of zero tolerance, because again, you're developing discretion, but you want to kind of start at that highest level of authority and chasing conflict, which basically means if an inmate's doing something they're not supposed to be doing, to approach them immediately and correct their actions. That's a habit that you want to get yourself used to. A lot of people avoid conflict, so you got to push yourself into it. And I think for me, one other thing is having good support staff next to you that you can model from. So in moments of ambiguity where you're kind of still learning the job or the application of the job, because if you're going to the academy or whatnot, or, people are going to kind of give you the academic side, but when you go to the facility, you're going to learn the application. And that's where there's risk involved. That's where you need people that provide you a safe environment to have some autonomy, but they're watching you from a distance. They're not going to let you fail that deep, but they're going to give you a chance to build some self-esteem. But you want to kind of have people that you can model off from. But if you have concerns in which, you have questions and whatnot, they're there to balance that. So you're never really alone. So again, I would say chase conflict, get used to saying no at the very beginning to kind of establish a very strong foundation, because authority really is the presence of saying no in this case, for the most part, because you are going to be tested. And just watching how your senior staff, move around and apply what you've been taught in the academy, or what you've been reading about academically, or even what you watch through the channels. The key here, guys, is that we provide all this information, but the courage isn't in us providing it. The courage is in you applying it. So it's good to kind of maybe have someone who models behaviors that, can strengthen your want to, let me try that myself. But what's your thoughts on that question, Russ? What would you say is the best way besides time with learning the job for the new boots to learning their position of authority? Most new staff that we're seeing are younger than the typical 30 plus.
So here's what I would say is that what I want to see staff doing, the younger staff is I want to safely introduce them to situations that are uncomfortable. When you're in situations that are uncomfortable, you are gradually over time going to get better and better at handling things. I don't want to let you sink or swim. I don't want to do any of that. But I want you to feel the pressure of delivering some kind of outcome. There are also times where I just want those staff members to sit back and to listen to what the seasoned staff are doing and saying to the inmates, and the manner in which they approach it, and the manner in which they dispense either information or orders or whatever else it is, so that they get used to the way that you should be talking to inmates. I want things to be balanced. I want inmates to receive a modicum of courtesy. I want to be able to ask them to do what they need to do. I want to be able to, at some point, be able to tell them and command them, hey, you need to do this. You need to do it now, whatever that entails. And then if necessary, to make them, assuming that we have a legitimate penological interest backing that up. So, and by that, what I mean is you can't just go out there and be heavy-handed and authoritarian and expect that you're going to come out of the situation all right, because you're not. But there is an aspect of the job where you do have to go in there and you're not being an authoritarian, but you are being an authority. And with that authority comes great power and great responsibility. And sometimes it's going to necessitate you making hard decisions and using force. I just went through this big thing in one of the forums I was in with ostensibly someone who claims they're an officer, saying that you should never have to use force. You can only use and should only ever use de-escalation techniques. And I was thinking to myself, where did this guy work at? This guy, obviously, he didn't work at the prison that I was at, that I was in the stairwell and for no reason got jumped by 4 or 5 fellas. He wasn't out there with me on the West Block yard when someone came up and just, sucker punched me, or any of the other dozens and dozens of, scraps and stuff that I've been into. And I wasn't heavy handed. I wasn't out there, barking orders and getting in guys' faces and stuff like that. This is just day-to-day stuff. A lot of it was chasing contraband, to be honest, or doing some validation work on some people. But you have a responsibility to enforce the rules and regulations and to do what you can to make that place safer. And when that happens, there will be conflict. And Anthony said, yeah, chasing conflict, putting yourself in positions that are uncomfortable. But that doesn't mean that we put ourselves into positions that are egregiously dangerous either. There are fine lines that we need to walk, and we need to go about it smart. And so that's hard because there's no exact roadmap I can give you. There's just kind of a general pathway that I can point you in.
Yeah, and guys, what's funny? When we do all these questions, this is what kind of formulates the books I write based on, the questions that I provided, been given to us in the course of years of doing Tier Talk. And guys, Friendly Talker, I love what she said here. She said, even though not in your line of work, there's always great advice at being a true leader on your show. Dealing with the people is art and skill. It's funny. I was talking to my publisher the other day, and they believe that the book that we've written or writing could be applied to outside of corrections. And they wanted to know if I'd be okay with that. I said, yes, because, I think that's a great idea. But having said that, I'm still writing it for my correctional people. I think the magic is how you want to apply it. So Friendly Talker, I love the fact that you're innovative enough to see that. Because, again, in order for me to find all the advice that I found here for the books, I had to go to business books. And to see my manipulation book is based on theories of that salesmen would use to manipulate, I had to borrow from elsewhere as well. I want to add one more thing before we get the next question from Edgar, but I want to add one more thing to Don. If you're a supervisor, your job is to protect your officers' perceptions of perception. I call it perception of authority, but your job is to protect your officers' perception of authority. So anytime an inmate goes to circumvent, your job is to make sure that inmate is reminded of that chain of command. So perception of authority is very keen in making sure that your staff feel effective. Okay, so Edgar has it.
Can I revisit? Because I want to dovetail in on what we said right there. One of the first things that I implemented as a brand new sergeant was, when inmates came up and approached me, because they want to approach me because I'm the guy with the chevrons, I'm the guy with the brass on the collar, and they're doing all these end arounds, trying to get around and circumvent what staff had told them. And, immediately the first thing I would say, excuse me, do you have permission to talk to me? And, I would get these blank stares and this look of horror would come across their face. And I would explain to them, not in these words, hey, there's a chain of command here. You have to go through your tier officer. If your tier officer says that you can come talk to me, then you can. So, and that's how we maintain the authority of our personnel out there. We don't let inmates undermine them. And then if it's something that officer can't handle for whatever reason, then I call them and I say, which way would you like it to be handled? And then I give them training on either training on how to handle it, or if it's something truly above and beyond their pay grade, then I go ahead and step in and handle it.
Love it. And then Edgar says, how do you deal with PTSD? Getting back to normal after my time in corrections just hasn't happened. So I'll go first, and then Russ will go. I've done a lot of videos on this, Edgar. So if you check out Tier Talk, you check out a playlist, you're going to see a lot of videos on mental health, whether I've talked about with Young, other professionals that work in the mental health side of corrections, William Young on the show, Russ. So my thing is this, is that obviously corrections is tough because you're working in an environment that if something does happen, you can't escape reminders. That's the key. And sometimes those reminders could be a scary thing, especially if you haven't really been able to specifically identify what happened to you and then basically be able to kind of draw it to a certain incident. I know a lot of people that have actually gone through PTSD because in some case they haven't made the intentional effort to really, but with professional help, go through the incident to specify all areas of concern. So when they go back to work, they know exactly what had to be addressed. A lot of people right now, what happens here is that they go through something at the moment, they think they're okay and they're not. They don't address what the specific concerns were that caused whatever that incident is. I mean, enough to where they feel motivated going back to work because they're, nothing's 100%, but they're more aware of what happened. And then the problem is because they don't understand what the concern is or how it happened, or more importantly, what they can do to prevent it from happening again, it gets triggered. It gets triggered because it hasn't been settled. It's just coming up on the surface as a reminder. So what I always tell people is that, one, it's okay to, first you have to know that, and I mentioned in every book I write, and sometimes I have Russ who is seen as this tough guy in corrections, and we tell you it's okay to be vulnerable, especially when it comes to your mental health. So what you want to do is when you go through a situation that is not an everyday situation, right? It's not an everyday situation. Sure, we prepare for it, but to actually go through is a totally different ball game. You got to allow yourself to decompress, even if it's like, well, I'm okay. Maybe you're not. So let's just go ahead, and listen, guys, you could talk to people you work with, but remember, they're going to try to get you to get back to work. You could talk to your loved ones. You don't have to be as specific, but remember, they're talking to you, the person in the uniform. And that's a lot different when it comes to addressing the person who's, who basically is the professional. Like, yes, I want to talk to Russ and, talk to Russ about, the professional side of things. We're partners. Why not? But I need to talk to, let's say, my loved one because I need them to address Tony, because even though Tony wore the uniform for 20 years, Tony is still Tony. So you have to find time to decompress, and you have to have someone there with you. And you really have to make sure that you understand the specifics of the concern so you can find a way to address those specifics. The last thing you want, and this is the truth, guys, this is the truth, is to go back to work with a lot of what happened to be unsettled, not understanding. That's the key. Not understanding what happened or why it happened or how it happened is going to be a problem when you go back to work and all of a sudden you're put back into that same spot and it's like, holy crap. Of course it's going to pop back up because it's unresolved. It's unresolved. It wants you to solve. So I think PTSD is sometimes concerns when they're not 100%, hear me out, but for the most part, there could be an intentional effort to let me really dig in deep and do my best to resolve the how. I would say the what and the why are definitely important, but I would also say don't do it alone. Do it with loved ones who understand you. Not about your function, not about what you need to do to be better, to be effective at the job, but rather I need to understand Tony so he could be effective at being a husband, a father, whatever the case may be, but the roles that are outside the profession that also matter. And I think, and it takes courage to do that. But having said that, I think that to me would be what my advice would be, is don't leave anything unresolved. Even if you think the moment's past, I'm good. And I mentioned these in my books as well. I still think it should be addressed, because again, you never know what you're pushing down that's going to pop up later. But what's your thoughts on that, Russ?
Yeah, I always want people to pay attention to where they're at in their current mental status. I think that's really important. I think that though too, so much of corrections is just conflict, and it doesn't necessarily always turn into an incident. It doesn't necessarily always turn into something that you would think would, could, or should affect you. But it's not necessarily any one incident, any one thing. What you have to pay attention to is it's that constant drip, 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 drip of adrenaline, and that's what it is. Because I think that's what and I'm not a professional, so don't take my word for this. But I think it's that constant little bit of adrenaline in there that causes us to tweak a little bit. And then we start trying to manage it through very not good techniques like alcohol, substances, acting out at work, acting out in the real world. And so I think that, what we have to do is, we have to have that safe spot where we can just talk to our family about it. I also think, though, that there's a point that we can reach where enough is enough, and it's time to put it away after a while and not keep picking at it like a scab. So I think that, and I hope that you guys will type in if any of this, is making sense to you there. And so it has to be one of those things where we achieve some kind of balance. We can't just, go there and just constantly be worried day in and day out, and, having it eating us alive, and not deal with it. But at the same time, we don't need to keep, examining it over and over again and just endlessly obsessing on it. And I'll tell you, I've seen a lot of good officers screw themselves up by trying to self-medicate and deciding that, hey, they're going to be a good old boy or whatever. And, everyone's out there doing their choir practice wherever it is. And, they're not working out. They're not taking care of their physical health. And, they're ignoring their family, whatever it is. And they have this whole list of unhealthy habits, instead of trying to balance things, stay the course, make sure that they take care of themselves, physically, mentally, emotionally, and deal with it in healthy regards. And that's why I'm a big proponent. I have a new website out there called Correctional Fitness and Recreation on Facebook. So if anyone wants to come and join that, I think that's a healthy outlet. Me, I hike, paddleboard. The wife and I have all kinds of things that we do. We go and do a Tough Mudder every year, and we're going to do a hike tomorrow. And I think that a lot of that, doing it ahead of time before you get behind the eight ball, is better. So working out and doing good recreation. I just joined a gun club, so I'm going to go out there and do some lead therapy after this week, and I'll be sharing that on there some. So I hope this makes sense. I hope that I've given you guys some ideas.
Yeah, guys, remember something, guys. The mental side of things is something that only you really know is affecting you. I mean, maybe your loved ones, because they'll see subtle changes, but when it comes to the job, shoot, it's more of the physical. You got to let them know about the mental side, and hopefully your job supports you as they should. I think there should, and we've talked about this before, like mental health evaluations every 2 years. Obviously, you do one before you get in the profession, but the profession has a habit of slowly, and if you're passive with this profession, it could slowly erode your mental well-being. So I think that constant checks. I mean, if they want you to have a perfect mental state going in, that's great, but you're going to help us maintain it. That's the key. So again, you also have to kind of understand yourself too. As I said, it's an inward dive, which not most people are willing to do. But you have to be willing to do it, because if you don't, it does pile up. And sometimes even, I think there's another good advice here too, guys. If you can't recognize the small changes inside of you, right? Start looking at the environment around you and see if they're changing. See if, people are trying to be a little bit more evasive with you, where before it was more welcoming, So if you don't have the courage to look inside, then maybe you could start from the outside, and that should, maybe get you to force yourself to look inside. But I will say this, guys, it is an intentional effort. It takes courage to do it, but you have to. Okay, so there's got another question by Big Whiskey. I'm going to have Russ go with this first, and then I definitely want to comment. But Russ, you're going to love this question, Russ, because Russ was a sergeant, retired as a sergeant, and I'll guarantee you he's dealt with this. Now, by the way, guys, just a side note. Russ now oversees rehabilitation, so Russ forgives everyone now. No, I'm kidding. All right. So Big Whiskey asks, what advice would you have for a newer sergeant that just inherited a problem CO to a very cohesive crew?
Okay, so that's a good one. Here's the thing that we really need to do is we need to identify what this guy's malfunction is. And then we have to decide whether it can be fixed or to what degree that we can fix it. Sometimes a person will be in a bad spot in their life personally, and maybe there's a way you can help them through that so that they continue on and they can get back in the right groove. There's also a chance that this person is an eternal fuck up, and no matter what you do, you're not going to get very much in the way of results. Nevertheless, you must try. You must attempt to try and put this person into a position where they can be successful. They may never be the firebrand type of officer that's out there, getting after it and chasing dope and cell phones and gangbangers and doing all that high level stuff. But maybe you can find a way to still fit them into the team in a way that they can be useful. This takes some critical thinking skills. This takes some creativity, and this takes some effort on your part. The easy thing to do is just to start throwing paper on him and hope that he goes away and finds something on graveyards, so that he can just muddle away the rest of his life, or puts him in a position where he has to go somewhere else and he becomes someone else's problem. But ostensibly, you're the one that the problem has been given to fix him. So that is indeed what you should do. And you should, make a bona fide effort at it, not just, try and pass it off, cover it up, do something else. I like to believe that, that some people can be reclaimed. Some people can be salvaged. I see that even in the work I do now. Certainly not every inmate that I meet with on a day-to-day basis, is going to turn out to be a productive citizen of society. But nonetheless, it's my job to give them the opportunity to take that shot and to improve their lot in life. It's not up to me to decide whether or not this person actually can do that or not. So I think that is the same tact that you want to take with an individual like that. Let's see if we can salvage this person. Let's see if we can develop them into a more well-functioning officer of some type.
Yeah, now, guys, I've done a show recently on building a cohesive team which can really be applied at any level, whether it's frontline supervision or higher management for the overall running of the house. There's a great book called The Advantage, and by Patrick Lencioni, again, business models. But so basically, what you want to do is you got to build trust, which allows for conflict, which ultimately allows for conflict, accountability, results. There's a 5-step process, right? So if there's trust, as a supervisor, I have 2 things. One is I'm going to go ahead and I'm not afraid of conflict. So if I have a team member that's not performing the way they have to do, the way they're supposed to, I have to confront them. Most times, the reason why supervisors don't confront problematic employee is because they're afraid of either conflict, which is a very selfish motive, believe it or not, because a lot of supervisors could say, you know what, it's not worth it. Russ is being problematic. It's not worth it, but it is, because you got to think of the team. And by the way, when you have an officer that's not doing their job, that means someone's picking it up for them, right? That means someone needs you to advocate for them. Because let's say if Russ wasn't doing what he's supposed to be doing, and I don't step up to Russ, the team is picking it up, or it's not being done, which is worse. So you're expected now to address that employee. So again, sort of like what I said, as an officer, when you start your profession new, I'm going to say when you start as a supervisor, chase conflict. I don't mean to be an ass. I mean, I'm not saying we oversee inmates, but we oversee people. I mean, and it's going to happen, So, the moment there's a conflict, you got to get yourself into the habit of addressing it. Now, granted, before you became a supervisor, you should have also held yourself to those standards, because when you become a supervisor, you decide to be that supervisor who does correct. You're going to have a lot of people that are going to see you as a hypocrite. So I'm going to say, when you're going to cross into supervision, you better make sure that you have had a good professional career. But with that said, you got to go ahead. If you have a cohesive team, the cohesive team is built on a level of trust. Once you have trust, it welcomes the other components of conflict. Because I'll give you an example. If there's trust between me and Russ isn't doing his fair share of what he should be doing, me and Russ could have an honest dialogue in an effort to bring Russ where he needs to be. Now, remember, this is a conflict, maybe, yes, but it's something that me and Russ have to discuss, because the team now is actually being affected by it. But granted, can I tell you something? Maybe Russ is having a bad day or a bad week. We don't know what's going on. So I'm not going to go and after Russ and chase him out of judgment. As a supervisor, I'm going to approach him with curiosity. Hey, Russ, how you doing? Hey, Russ, you haven't been yourself. Hey, everything okay? What's going on? And try to work with Russ, because maybe Russ is having a bad moment. We all have it, guys. But, having said that, I'm going to approach Russ. And you know what's good about this too? Another thing, if I know Russ was a committed worker at one point, he starts to fall back, it may not be that hard for me to hold Russ accountable to things either, because we know what Russ's potential is. Accountability, a lot of people look at it as something negative. It's not. It's accountability means, hey, Russ, I know you're better than this. Come talk to me. And again, it's a private talk. It's not something that, the team has to be there. But having said that, there is another concern, though. The other concern is when the talk doesn't get you to where you need to be, then you're going to have to, do what must be done for the team. So a lot of times when people don't take those actions, the supervisors that don't take those actions, because, well, me and Russ were officers together, and it doesn't matter, guys. Most of the time, as I said, we avoid conflict for very selfish reasons. But when you become a supervisor, your responsibility is to the team. I know a lot of people will say, well, you got to build relationships with your people as supervisors, but building relationships isn't the end game. It's building relationships to be productive. Let's not forget that other part. And then it's balancing productivity with relationships, because at the end of the day, it's not like I'm being productive and forgetting about the relationships. I got to balance both. And part of that, to be honest with you, is care and candor. I care for Russ, but I'm also going to be truthful to Russ, and I think that is what the team will see as a true benefit. So again, I hope that answers your question. And one last thing, guys, conflict When there's trust is easy, because conflict is usually about ideas or, strategies or whatnot. But if you have trust and you're able to get through that conflict, accountability is what matters. And accountability is harder for a supervisor because that's about performance and behaviors. That's personal. So having said that, you get through that conflict perspective and you have that trust, you can actually start holding people accountable. But you still got to have that trust as a foundation. All right, so let me get to, there's a lot of questions popping up.
Oh,
So
let's get to them. Let's bat them out in short order.
Oh, I thought there was I guess there's another Jolene, Jojo. Sorry about that. Yeah, I thought it was you. So let's just do it this way. Hello, Jojo, because I call you Jojo. I apologize. And hello, Jolene. Hello, Jolene. Okay. Hey, Russ. Well, let's go. I started some comments here, but a lot of stuff did come through. Hey, I like what Edgar Flores says. Accountability for your coworkers shows that you care. It shows that trust you have in the person next to you and the faith you have in them. Hey, hey, Russ, let me ask you a question just to piggyback off this real quick while I look for the other questions. For me as a supervisor, accountability matters because I want people to be committed, especially because of the environment we work in. I mean, we work in a job where commitment matters, care for what you do matters. When some people say, well, I'm not going to do my job because management's pissing me off. Okay, so you're not willing to do searches knowing that a safe facility really is to help you and your partner, the people that trust you to do the job. So corrections doesn't give you that chance to be disenfranchised and not be committed to the work. No matter how angry management may get you, I get it, but you are still responsible for yourself and you are your brother and sister's keeper. But Russ, I mean, is accountability or holding people accountable necessary, not just for supervisors, but for each other, regardless of if you're having a bad day or not?
Yeah, this is one of the things that's really has the potential to negatively impact any given institution and department. And this can be something that starts from the bottom up, or it can also be something that starts from the top down. But when things are being negatively impacted and it impacts safety and security, you're not making it any better by also impacting safety and security. You're never going to get back at a bad administration by making things worse inside the penitentiary or jail that you work at. That's shooting yourself in the foot. It's short-sighted. And who really bears that responsibility? Well, yeah, I think that there's a lot of that responsibility to be bared by the institution or by the department. But ultimately, we correctional officers have to do what we have to do to stay safe. And biting back at administration through, cheap, petty shots is not going to do that. We're probably at some point shortly here going to get much deeper into this subject because of some things that have happened recently in California. But they're things that I hesitate to say too much about right now. I really feel like, there's some things going on that are truly making things unsafe. But I think that staff are just, actually putting as much into the mix, and it's making for a very volatile environment. And I know people, want to assign blame and things like that, but that isn't necessarily a solution. But that'll be for another day shortly here, hopefully.
Yeah, and Russ, let me just get to the other question. So I want to get to Correctional Officers of America, but hold on, because I got to try to organize their questions. But I want to get Melissa Haas. She mentioned something great. The execution of discipline after the talk of, hey, you're slacking in your behavior seems to be the problem, especially with almost all the facilities across the country facing staffing issues. Okay, so let me mention something here. So obviously, because of staffing, it's become quantity over quality, and I get that. So a lot of the burden has been on senior staff to model good behaviors, and we're losing senior staff. We know that. And the problem is also that a lot of pressure is on training departments to transform individuals as opposed to cultivate. And I've discussed that in one of the books I have here. But I will say this, as a supervisor, I understand what it is that we're going through. So maybe there is a softer approach where instead of me going right after the individual, which I should never have done anyway, I should never do anyway, I approach them with curiosity to see what the concern is. I've never led through fear, because fear pushes people into self-preservation mode, which means you're never going to get the best of your people, because they're going to be afraid of you. So obviously, if they're making mistakes, they're not going to tell you. They're going to hide it under the rug until it's, becomes whatever a mountain of shit that you got to deal with. So I think the best approach is if you can approach someone through curiosity to see what the concerns are before you judge them. Because when I look at someone, I look at a concern of whether do I have someone that has a competency issue, like can they do the job? And I got this from Ramsey, I believe, or if it's an integrity issue. Now, the thing is this, guys, is that if it's competency, they could be trained. I get that. It's integrity there's not much you can do with that. So there's a lot of people that make an honest mistake, but they're so mad at management because, well, if I do this, management's going to write me up. Okay. But the problem is in corrections, you still need to take accountability regardless of what those consequences could be, because at the end of the day, there's too much at risk. So now when you don't tell somebody and it's discovered, this isn't a competency issue anymore. This is an integrity issue. So we've always told people that even though the consequences could be severe, you can't stop yourself from reporting it when it needs to be reported, because at the end of the day, the first person that needs to hold you accountable is yourself. And integrity doesn't come after it's been discovered. It comes when you realize there's a concern. And then you go ahead and bring it up. And for those that say, well, management makes that impossible because they're quick to punish. Yeah, deal with that later. You're making it impossible. We'll talk to management later. Yes, there should be an environment that cultivates, but that will never be an excuse if you don't bring it up when it's needed. So I want people to know that. I mean, we could always talk to management and set a great environment in which, we can cultivate and teach people through their mistakes. But if you fail to report something, and that is the reason why you fail to do it, that's a problem. I mean, would you agree with that, Russ?
Yeah, I mean, there's an expectation and a duty to report on some different things. There's a limit to the discretion that you have, in law enforcement. And so, some of those things, maybe you can correct at the lowest possible level, and some things that you can't correct at the lowest possible level. You have an officer that's, starting to slack or having some family issues. Cool. You have an officer that's showing up drunk because of those family issues and stuff, and suddenly you're in a whole new ball game. So, understand we're all human, and we can all identify with, having been under pressures that made us act in ways that were less than professional and so forth. But we still have to go through and do the things that are necessary, that are most impactful, not on an individual, but on the institution itself.
I love that, Russ, and I love what Michelle Ann just said. Basically, in response to the staff maybe failure to report, it's I love what she said: deliberate indifference. And Russ, for people that do, because I had a moment like that, guys. I've worked with supervisors that led through fear, and every time if I made a mistake, it's self-preservation. And there's another thing too, guys. Corrections requires decision makers, and let's be honest, every decision has a risk. And if you're a supervisor that does lead through fear, your staff's not going to make decisions. They're actually going to be risk aversive, right? They're not going to make decisions in that timely manner when they're trying to figure it out. They're going to wait for the perfect time. But corrections isn't difficult. It's complex. It's the problems kind of mount up. So having said that, that deliberate indifference, it only affects, believe it or not, the people that are next to you. And I think that's true. Like if I decide that I'm more concerned about getting in trouble over something that has a serious consequence because it's a serious concern, and I decide not to report it, I think that self-preservation mode now affects my relationship with my team, because if I fail to report something that's a major concern, I'm not worried about anybody else but myself. Now, yes, my supervisor, man, but they're going to come at me, and but at this point, it doesn't matter, because you're putting everybody at risk because you're afraid to step up and hold yourself accountable. I don't care about, that's this supervisor at this point. We can figure that out later. But right now, we had to discover you did something. And now that thing that you're telling me is not a reason. It's an excuse. Russ, would you agree that level of accountability towards each other is what should be first?
Yeah, it's one of those things, where we want to take into account each other's humanity, but we also want to take into account, each other's responsibility and the oath that each of us, that we take to the badge, to the country, to the state, to the department that we're in. I just think that, sometimes there's no good solutions. Sometimes there's only bad solutions. And, I've seen, people that, they just stayed in the spot that they were in, and, they ended up, not mending their ways. They ended up, becoming a danger to themselves, a danger to the department. And, they end up getting the axe. And I'm not even talking about the ones that end up in, being manipulated or corrupted and that kind of thing. So it just has to be something that we're all aware of. You can only look out for that black sheep in your family just so often and just so many times before you end up cutting them off. This is one thing that I see in my new job. Over and over again are, families that they finally cut that black sheep off, and these people, they feel very isolated and so forth. But they understand, that they went out there and they slammed dope one too many times. And from that point on, they no longer had that social support network of their family operating for them. And so I kind of see, Michelle, I call them ominous parallels between some of the things that officers go through and inmate families go through.
Yeah, and guys, if you're sending the questions, there's a lot of questions coming through. Can we
let's fit to.
Yeah, but can we try to send them where they're a little bit more concise, because they're coming broken up, and it's hard for me to piece them all together. I got to star them, and I got to kind of. So I want to get to the questions. Oh, Anthony Gangi, I love your books. It truly can help any who is just starting or someone who's been in the field for a while. Truly thankful for all the help you have given me. Thanks, Foley. I appreciate that. And then again, I got one coming out at the end of the month. So get your pre-order today. That's going to partner well with the other two books and the Daily Reader. Hey, this is a good one, Russ. And Russ, I'm going to have you take the lead on this because I got to run upstairs. I'm going to get another bottle of water. But I want to see if you can answer this question for me, Russ, and I'll be right back. It goes, what do you think of the changes in uniforms? A lot of places changed from a law enforcement iron uniform to polo shirts. I think it gives the appearance of lack of discipline.
Okay, so there's a lot of nuance to be seen in that, in my estimation. The first place that I was ever able to wear a polo shirt is when I started with as a senior juvenile correctional officer. One thing, oh man, how do I even delve into this? So let's talk about the way things used to be. When I first started, everything had to be starched and creased, and, you were wearing a tie a lot of the times, especially if you had a long sleeve shirt and it was Class A. And boy, you talk about a uniform that was really not very utilitarian, especially, when you're up there on the 5th tier of Charlie section, and, you're stamping out fires, and, the inmates are flooding, and, you're trying to not get your uniform dirty. That was all bad. One of the things that we had happen, and California Department of Corrections, those, we got to go to the jumpsuit. And the jumpsuit was great because the jumpsuit allowed you to, feel good, and it was very utilitarian. And you could just throw it in the wash. There weren't any seams that you had to starch, and it was great. And so, I had some people at some points along my career and stuff, that have said things. Well, your uniform should always look 100% sharp. And I would just be like, hey, your uniform should just be within compliance. Because I always felt like I never saw a guy that was spit shining his boots able to keep up with me. But that's just from my perspective. As to the polo shirts are kind of like a trade-off. Polo shirts are, kind of like, halfway between that Class A and partway to being that jumpsuit or battle dress uniform, BDU, as they call it. So I think that that's fine. It adds a level of comfort. It adds a level of, not having to spend as much time, dealing with your uniform, which is great, especially, if you're working 16-hour shifts. You just throw on another pair of pants and a brand new polo, and you're good to go. So I don't know. There's, people have a lot of different ideas about what the uniform should represent. What I don't ever want to see, though, is where they just let us, dress down and not identify ourselves as something separate and distinct from what the inmate population is, because labels are important with regards to maintaining our authority and setting us apart and acting differently than an inmate acts. So I know I was all over the place there, but if anyone, did I do okay, Anthony?
Yeah, I was able to hear it.
Okay.
I know for us, obviously, uniforms tend to be a little bit more comfortable. Polos tend to be a little bit more comfortable, and it can matter, when you're trying to respond to those codes. But having said that, I like the professional look of the uniform. I like the way it makes us look. I think it sets a presence with the inmate population. I mean, at one point, there were complaints about when we bloused our pants to go over the boots because inmates thought it was too military. So, I think the more lax we look, the more that presence is not there. I mean, I work in a state where we're law enforcement, and when we look good when we're in our Class A's, and even and good in our Class B's. I mean, we look like, true, law enforcement professionals behind those walls. So I like that look. But again, I'm not going to really attack anybody who's, wearing the other side. I mean, the key is for us to be in uniform, but I do think the presence of authority does showcase itself better in what Russ had said, the kind of the button up, uniform that you would see very similar to what a police officer is wearing. Friendly Talker had a good question. So let me get rid of that one. With more dangerous teens being charged as adults, does that mean they end up in major prisons? If so, how do they fare with inmates and correctional staff? So I can start off on this one because I've worked in 5 prisons in my career. So I've worked from females to males, but most of my time's in maximum security facilities. More of a prison management side. Yes, as a sergeant in one, but most of the time in prison management. And when I worked with the females, and also when I was prison management working at the maximum security facility, I had a young individual that had just reached 21, and there was an option to get them out of the juvenile justice system, even though they can kind of hold them until they're 25. A lot of laws that are unique as long as the crime was committed when they were juveniles. But I've worked with when I was at the female facility, I've worked with females that were underage, but they got charged as adults. So it really does depend on their crime. But it also, to be honest with you, sometimes the juvenile justice system may hold them until they reach a certain age. And then they wind up sending them over to the state facilities. And it becomes harder for us because we have to watch how they're managed, at least until they're of the age, because you have a lot of people that like DIFUS and stuff like that are going to keep track of how that individual is handled. And Russ will talk about that shortly in the juveniles, because Russ will work with juveniles. But I will tell you one thing: if they're sentenced as adults, and for some reason the juvenile system feels that they're too dangerous to be around the other juveniles, so they send them to the adult facility, that puts a lot of eyes on the adult facility, because there's still going to be people that are going to be very invested in that juvenile. So I will say it's not a good idea, because we have to make efforts to protect that individual. Not like we throw them to the wolves when they turn 18. But having said that, we do have to protect that individual. They're going to be very controlled movements. We're going to probably keep them in a cell with no cellmate, probably by themselves. I'm not saying they don't get to interact with anybody, but we got to be very wary of all those interactions that they have. And but Russ, you working with juveniles, I mean, you would probably see that same attention if you had a juvenile in an adult facility, because I don't think the attention lessens. It's just now it's going to be a set of eyes at that adult facility watching that juvenile. Correct?
Well, yeah, but a lot of what we really see, at least I would say in California, is the juvenile system is just a way for especially a certain subset of juveniles to matriculate from one system to another. And there's really nothing to it other than them saying, hey, yeah, I got my start early on. I was already in the system. I got out. I did another crime, went right into the adult system. And this is worn as a badge of honor for them. And, these are really, very dangerous individuals. These are, people that, they have decided that the prison system is for them. And they're just going to alternate their life getting in and getting out while they move up that food chain inside of, whatever given STG that they've decided they're going to be a part of, whether that's, blood or Crip or Sereno or skinhead or whatever it is. So, the juvenile system, in some ways, sometimes from certain points of view, is just a feeder system for a bunch of, predators that are maturing early, if that makes sense.
No, it does. I mean, as I said, guys, with juveniles, there's a lot more effort to also try to rehabilitate them.
There is, and I felt blessed to have that opportunity to work with some juveniles that, we actually, got to save or salvage or however you put it. But at the same time, here it is, it's years and years later. And, I showed up the other day and, man, old juvenile recognized me. And I was like, well, apparently you didn't learn your lesson, did you? And nope, I just went straight from juvenile to jail and going to prison next week.
Yeah.
So,
and good question by Correctional Officers of America. Why is it important for correctional leadership to recognize and support COs as first responders and as law enforcement officers?
yeah.
I will say one thing on this. I wrote an article a few years back that went into the hundreds of thousands of. It was just trending at the time. I think it was in 2015, and it was, yes, correctional officers are law enforcement. It's what basically opened up everything I'd done. I think it was the first time that was ever mentioned. At least to that level. I was told that was the first time it was ever. I think it was the first time that it was ever mentioned at that level. Let's just say at that level where that support was. I will say the reason why you need it from correctional leadership is they're the voice to the outside. So having said that, they should be defending that, because one, there's funding involved in that, but two, it creates great value on the inside to let the staff know that you see them at that level. I mean, there's no denying the work that's being done, but I think that's not about recognition. I think he mentioned recognition. Let me just look at his question again. Leadership to recognize. It's not recognizing. I'm going to change that word to appreciation. I think recognition is very superficial. I think for us to be seen as first responders, as we should be as officers, it's because it shows that we're appreciated in what we do, because again, we're in comparison to other law enforcement roles, right? So no one's saying, recognize a police officer for being a police officer. No, appreciate them for what they do. we all know what they do. So it's not about recognizing them, because that's, at my level, that's very superficial and surface. It's about appreciating them and letting them know, we know what you do, and through those behaviors, you definitely are a first responder. I mean, that's the key. It's for me is, if I had management that came out and said, hey, our people are officers, this is what they do, this is how they respond, and that, yes, that's showing the front line that I appreciate what they do, I appreciate their efforts, and that just, to me, has a lot more weight than the external of a recognition. But yes, management leads the way in that, especially for states that don't have that level of I guess you want to say or identification. But having said that, what's your thoughts on that, Russ?
Well, yeah. So, most of us, if we work for, any government entity, is we have some sort of statutory powers of arrest. And then secondarily, we are also a first responder. I've never once had any other law enforcement agency show up at any of my riots on the inside. I haven't even had them show up necessarily at some of the homicides that I've been present at. So, yeah, we are all, truly law enforcement officers. There's some disparity there with regards to, should we, and I believe that we should have that status that actually, names and lists us as a peace officer. I do believe that. And I think that there's a lot of, states and maybe some jurisdictions and stuff, that are trying to shortcut it and maybe not provide as much pay, not provide as much training. But that always comes back and bites them in the ass, because all they do is they end up having to, shell out a bunch more money every time somebody quits, because, they're not, really truly invested in retention. So, I think that that's just, a really short-sighted way to look at things, by not giving, each and every correctional officer, peace officer status. That's what we should have. We should also have, the training that goes along with that. And we should have the equipment and pay that goes along with that as well. I talk to people regularly, less and less in this country and more in some of the outlying countries, that don't even have, OC pepper spray. And OC pepper spray is one of the best things you can possibly, and, makes your eyes burn and all that kind of thing. But you know what? In the end, it reduces injuries and saves lives, and everyone should have that. But everyone else should also have other things that go along with that. They should all have a baton. They should all have a vest. They should, most of them, I believe, should also carry taser, when it's necessary. And instead, what we do is we have a bunch of people, propagandizing us, telling us that, oh no, we can't have that. It'll make your job more dangerous. Like, what? And I've had people tell me that. They say, and they've done it so effectively. They've actually, bullshitted officers that tell them, hey, man, you know what? Wearing a vest would be really dangerous, because the inmates are then gonna target your vital areas. I'm like, what? Who is selling that boatload of crap? So anyway, just another of my pet peeves.
I want to add something else to that too, guys. So the law enforcement title also comes with a lot of responsibility towards it. It puts management at a higher level of accountability for their staff, believe it or not. So that's another concern. I mean, lately we've been hiring quantity over quality, as I said before, and we have to be very wary. When you hand out that title, you have to make sure that the people that you have in those positions can embrace that level of responsibility. Because again, for myself, I manage a law enforcement agency, because in Jersey, that's what we are. So the staff that work it are held to a higher level of accountability. It's sad to say, but it's a lot less forgiveness, because people expect more from law enforcement professionals. So especially use of force, and like correctional says, with great power there must also come great responsibility. And guys, I'm going to tell you something right now. Even as prison management, one thing you cannot delegate is your responsibility. So having said that, you have to hold the people that now have those titles of law enforcement to a higher level of accountability. I'm not, and guys, I got to be careful when I say this because I'm not being condescending to those who don't have that title. I'm just telling you, when you welcome that title in or you fight for that title, be careful what comes with that as well. Because yes, it is a level of appreciation that we all deserve, but it also means, like Correctional Officer of America said, it's a level of responsibility that, you know, we have to make sure people can embrace that and be ready for that, because management is also held to a higher level of accountability when it comes to that. So here goes an interesting question from Don. How do you two deal with addressing transgenders by calling them by their preferred pronoun? Okay, so obviously the changes that have happened in corrections. So we're going to tell you what's correct. I'm not going to tell you how we feel about certain things, but I will tell you what's expected because we want to make sure that you guys keep your job. So obviously PREA has changed in how we operate. So having said that, we are held to different standards if your state follows PREA guidelines. So when it comes to the preferred pronoun, yeah, like what exhibit says, inmate, you got to realize something. This is really related to men who identify as females, or that's their gender expression. So having said that, are you going to make mistakes? Are you going to accidentally call them him or her? It could him or whatever he. It could happen because if you work in a male facility and you're dealing with men for most of the time, and you have someone that identifies as a female, it could slip. But if you are not doing it disrespectfully, and if you're corrected by them, and you change your tone and say, oh, you know what, I'm sorry, I did not realize you identify as a female. I will try my best going forward. They may say it's harassment, but if it's not intentional and it's more of just, hey, I'm in an environment where I work with men. I'm not doing it to harass them. I'm doing it because, I'm sorry. I'm just used to dealing with men. They don't really have an argument. But with that said, if you're doing it purposely and just, if like Russ says, I identify as a woman, and I tell Russ, well, I don't care, you're a man in my eyes, that's a problem. That's going to be a problem in today's corrections. Now, whether I agree with it or not, guys, it doesn't matter, because my job is to enforce what's been passed down to me. So having said that, is it hard? I think for people, here's the funny thing. You have a job to do. So I'm not saying that you have to accept it, but you have to do it. And that's the key. So sometimes when you look to accept it before you do it, which is usually what I tell people most of the time to get an understanding, but this may be a little bit harder because it can conflict with people's really true personal beliefs. You got to carry out the job, and sometimes that bias is going to affect your ability to do that. But again, that's just the way the world spins right now. And it goes, the PREA, LOL. If you didn't have at least one PREA put on you, your complaint against you, you weren't doing your job. We're going to do a show one day about how that could be misused. We actually just did a show the other day about what PREA expects of you if an inmate's been raped. What's your job if an inmate's been sexually assaulted? And we said, well, you know what? We'll address PREA being misused later, but let's just stay focused on, what to do if an inmate gets sexually assaulted. But I still got some more questions here. Let me just get rid of that one. I'm going to try to get to Correctional Officer of America, because the thing is, some of the questions that they did, they're good questions, but they got chopped up. And I want to make sure I give the question. Hey, Russ, hold on. You want to answer but be fair, Russ. Remember, people listen to you in context.
Okay. I'll answer anything, man. Shoot it at me.
No, do you want to answer? Did you have to deal with that before you retired?
So not so much on the pronouns thing, I think that, I think that, whatever we have to do on a day-to-day basis is, and that kind of little bit of bullshit, because that's what it is de minimis in nature. It takes nothing to go ahead and play along. The part that actually pisses me off is what the department itself does with regards to, here we have the Prison Rape Elimination Act, and then they have these things where they want us to go along to get along with inmates and change their genders I'm cool with that, right? The thing I don't like, though, is the fact that, they will take a wolf and they will throw it in amongst the sheep and let rapes and sexual assaults happen, based on the fact that they want to play along with that little bit of wokeism. I take my responsibility to inmates very seriously, with Secure. And I think it's a shame that departments across the land don't take that as seriously as a person like me does. And so that's where I really draw the defining line with regards to, the whole, transgender things. You can't throw a wolf in amongst the sheep and pretend that everything is going to be okay. Okay, I'm off my soapbox now.
No, you know what, Russ, you're right. I think the difference between people like us that work behind the wall, who our job is to protect the sheep to some extent, and then the public who may have a different perspective, is that if someone's rights infringe on someone else's rights, it is. I'm sorry. This person says that they're transgender. They want to now go to a female facility. I'm sorry, because I got to worry about the females at that facility who at that point could be considered victims, where sometimes the public gets so focused on individualized rights that they don't understand how it could affect someone else's rights, especially within the prison system where they could be misused, which I'm sure could even happen on the outside. So my biggest concern here is that when people manipulate their rights, and then it winds up infringing on someone else's rights, because as Russ literally said, protecting the inmate population. So let's not overlook that. That's someone that worked as a correctional officer who was a sergeant telling you that his biggest thing right now is if someone's manipulating the rights of, let's say the transgender, and I'm a male, but I'm going to play a game and get to the female facility, because that could happen. Obviously that does happen. And now they can go assault females at a female facility. And Russ's number one job is, let's say, to protect those females at that female facility. That's going to be a problem for us. So a lot of people wish that, all we worked around were sheep all day. And it's not. It's the wolf. And that wolf truly does direct what we do. We don't listen. If we lived our life where the sheep directed us, we would be manipulated. It's sad to say, but the wolf directs us. I mean, we look at it because we know that there's evil in the world. So the people that work the dangerous jobs are directed by the wolf. Where's the wolf going? That's where we're going. And the people on the outside, they're able to live as directed by the sheep because we're out there dealing with the wolf, and I think that's true. A couple more questions, then we can start wrapping up.
Okay.
Edgar says, let me read it here because it's bigger, and then I'll what would you do if an officer was attacked by an inmate and the captain on ship refused to believe that it happened and refused to put the inmate in the hole? Happened to me. My partner witnessed it and called the code, but the captain refused to do anything about it. So here's the thing. Before we do that, Edgar, I don't want to get anybody in trouble for putting specifics. So I'm assuming this is a very generalized question. So let's read it again real quick, because maybe I misread it. I think I misread this question. I apologize. In general, Mr. Gangi. Oh, yeah, I see it. I don't know why I automatically thought that this person asked this question. And I actually thought it was Edward Johnson. Edward Johnson asked, what would you do if an officer was attacked by an inmate and the captain on shift refused to believe that it happened and refused to put the inmate in the hole? Now, this comment may accidentally delete. Hey, Edward, you could delete that comment because I think we understand what the question is. Hey, Russ, what's your thoughts on Edward Johnson?
Okay, so if I'm in there working, with the amount of weight that I have on my collar, and I call up the captain and say, hey, you know what, we got to put this guy in the hole. He attacked one of my officers, and the captain tells me, hey, I don't believe that. You know what? We'll leave that. We'll leave that until Monday morning, and then we'll check into that. Yeah, that's not okay with me. And that's one of those things I'm going to put my ass on the line and I'm going to, go in there. I'm going to get the Rolodex, and I'm going to call the warden, or I'm going to call the commander of the jail. But I'm not letting it rest with that captain. And you know what? All the consequences of the chain of command, be damned. I'm not good with that, and I'm not going to be a little wimp and say, okay, well, we'll just wait about it until Monday or whatever. No, that inmate presents a clear and present danger to that officer and to potentially many other people as those shifts elapse. And so I am not going to let that happen 100%. I'll let someone, at least 2 steps above that captain make that decision. And then I'm going to the ground. I'm going to the mat on that one all the way, because that's fucking uncool.
All right, so obviously, this is definitely a CO. Hopefully, he has a union, because he's like, hey, there were cameras next to him. Look at the cameras. So I mean, he, hey, strong with us. Good for you, man. You're strong with your more. Good for you. So I can add to that too. Maybe I could talk about from the prison. Private prison. Oh, okay. Oh, this was, so maybe he no longer works there. Okay, good. I just don't want to get anybody in trouble on this channel. So forgive me. I wasn't trying to get you to minimize your perspective. I just want to make sure that I protect the people who have the courage to invest in what we're doing.
But even at a private prison or whatever, though, I'm not good with that. I'm following it up the chain of command. And that's because you have a level of responsibility. I mean, we literally hold people's lives in our hands. And so, minimizing, he only got a scratch, or, the inmate's sorry. You know what? Fuck all that, man. Policy and procedure is policy and procedure, and you follow it. And if you're not going to follow it, I don't care if you have more weight on your collar than me, like I say, I'm going to the mat. I'm going to the mat all the way.
Yeah, and I want to mention something too, because you're right. Private facilities operate a little bit differently. It's definitely something that's more about saving the dollar or making profit. I'm sorry. And there's a difference, guys, between making profit and as the state would do, save money. If you got to spend it, you got to spend it. But remember, the people that have private prisons, they're not loyal to anybody but shareholders in some extent. But we do have dedicated officers that work in those facilities that, again, do deserve the respect because they're, doing the same job as we are. But I will say this, management down, if I saw that. So mind you, guys, I know management, a lot of people think managements are God sometimes because we can get all this information. But mind you, the reason why we know a lot is because we have more resources than everyone. In my position, I'm able to make a phone call and get whatever information I need. I'm able to get camera footage if I need it, a logbook if I need it. I have the authority to do that. But I will say, because we oversee so much of a big areas, we are reliant on the people that provide us that information. So if I knew that an issue like that happened, and however I discovered it, but if it wasn't discovered through who should have told me, there's going to be zero tolerance for that individual, because my greater concern is, if you didn't tell me about this one incident, what else haven't you told me? So the person's integrity to me is shot. It's done. Because again, I need that person to tell me that information. And when they don't tell me that information, then I feel I can't properly run my facility. So if I find that information through any other source besides how I'm supposed to get it from, and then that person tries to give me an excuse about it later on, that person's going to be put under investigation, because me as management, I am responsible for everything that happens in that facility. And I don't have an excuse when someone from even a cat, whatever that rank is, doesn't tell me. I'm responsible for that facility regardless. So if let's say Russ was my captain and he doesn't tell me information and it could lead to a lawsuit, that doesn't clear me. It doesn't clear me. So I better hold Russ to some action. Hey, Russ, you know what? You're getting charged. You're getting suspended, possibly removal or demotion. I mean, at that point, I got to commit to every effort to show that, hey, I may have missed this one thing, but this is what I did to the person that I trusted to give me that information. So having said that, if you feel that it wasn't reported, there are so many routes that you could take to make sure those matters are heard. And if it's a private prison, then go outside of it. But again, when you do it, it has to be proven because, a lot of times, me and Russ, we could run on a lot of stuff that's being told to us. And then all of a sudden we look at it a little bit deeper and the story we're getting is not 100% accurate. So I don't want to, but in this case here, if that was the case, I would hold that person accountable. And Russ, this is a good question. This person is getting ready to start the system too. Which correctional officer's position in the jail or prison get a firearm? Inmate, prisoner, transportation, tower guards, premise guards, anything else like special investigations? You want to go with that for Russ? Because that's more of the tactical.
So mostly what you're dealing with, at the level where we're talking about officer actually as a rank, as it were, especially in California Department of Corrections, we have a lot of firearms out there. We have firearms in control booths. We have firearms in wall posts. We have firearms in dining halls, and we have firearms in towers. Right. And that's what we have as far as securing the perimeter. As far as transportation, we have firearms on transportation, both at the level where we're taking a single or double or triple inmate out, maybe to, medical or something like that. And we also have firearms with regards to what we have inside of our great, big, huge, humongous CDCR buses. The other parts, that we deal with firearms are necessarily escapes. When we're doing that, we'll also take firearms out if we're doing, an investigation. Like I would take if I was doing an investigation on an escape, I would naturally take a firearm with me, and that kind of thing. So, and those are the basics. There's also, of course, some special functions like with regards to parole agents. In the county that I work, we have probation officers from our jail, not from our jail, from the probation department, because they're two separate entities in this county, that also have firearms. In California, with regards to CDCR, we also have SSU agents that are armed. Some of those SSU agents, let's see, we have fugitive apprehension team, which is also, I believe, duly sworn with United States Marshals. They all have firearms. So there's kind of a big cornucopia of things where there are, armed officers, and, everywhere from, local prison level all the way to all of these special details and so forth. I hope that answered it, but it's kind of it's kind of a long answer.
Yeah, because and also it varies across policy to policy, facility to facility. I mean, I've seen some people have outside details with no weapon because they go alone, or sadly, I've seen some outside details with one officer with a weapon.
Yeah, we have that right here. We have that right here where I'm at. It happens all the time.
Yeah, so I mean, unfortunately, some policy needs to be updated. I would love to see, like, I would love to see like the higher level practices. I mean, maybe like a centralized national international committee that oversees all correctional practices, and they really kind of no. Hear me out for a second. This is very what if hypothetical, what if crazy what if, but. Basically look at what states have in different areas, the more effective policies, and start bringing everybody together on what's more effective. Because it's hard for me sometimes to look at some of these states and wondering why they're doing it this way. And then sometimes people say, well, because they don't know any better. Sometimes, where I see that a lot on, to be honest with you, when I'm reading the news, and guys, this is not, it's not just research. I'm not researching. When I review things, a lot of stuff from the jails all across the country seem to operate totally different in certain things. And I don't know if it's because some of the sheriffs may not have jail experience. I don't know, but sometimes when you see something that happens, it's like, oh my God, why would they do it that way? And it's like, wow, I would just love to see some more consistency. Edgar Florid, Russ, says, what do you think of some states making tobacco illegal in prisons? I understand they use it for gambling or other trades, but what are your thoughts on it? I'm okay with it. I'm happy that they did it. I was there when it happened.
Okay.
At my facility, and I thought it was. If I may add one thing, Russ, because it may add to the context of what you have to say. The reason why I was okay with this, granted, was one, it became a very unhealthy setting for people that had to deal with it. And here's another thing, guys. A lot of people didn't realize when I worked at the male facility was inmates were allowed tobacco, right? So a lot of them were smoking in their cells, which we wouldn't really chase after them for tobacco, maybe a little stupid little on the spot charge, but it really made the spot tough to breathe. So removing the tobacco or making it a higher level charge if they have it really started making the air a little bit more breathable when you're working in these facilities that are, you don't have windows, man. You got to breathe that air. What's your thoughts on that, Russ?
So anyway, I think that overall, from one perspective, it's a good policy. One of the things it does, it does definitely help cut down on some of the diseases caused by it. And though I think about that mostly from the staff perspective, we're probably spending fewer dollars with regards to, how it impacts inmates. The thing that kind of disappointed me about when CDCR did it is there was kind of a predictable arc for it to follow, and they didn't do anything about it, because the way it started is at first they were just going to, deny letting them, smoke inside the buildings. And of course, inmates, that is simply, there's no way to enforce that. They're going to do it. And no matter how much paperwork you throw at them and stuff like that, it's just not going to happen. So it went on that way for a while. And then they decided, okay, we're going to go ahead and we're going to take away all tobacco products. And I thought that's great, except for it's going to create another brand new problem. And that new problem is either going to, keep going and keep going and keep going, which it has, or, it's going to get stamped out in short order. And so, this is what I predicted all along is that they're going to create a brand new black market for things. And that black market is going to, really be very lucrative for those who want to do it. But the black market is not only going to be lucrative for the tobacco products, it's going to open up brand new conduits for other things to get in. Cell phones, because we were just doing that right before cell phones were really, in a position to take off. And then, of course, other forms of controlled substances, and the amount of money on the controlled substances, from a prison perspective, came way, way down where it was way, way more affordable. But the price of tobacco went up, 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 where, you could sell a can of Bugler for, $4, $5, $6, $7, $8, $900, depending on how things were going at the time. And so what did you do? You just ended up buttressing this huge problem with regards to opiates, methamphetamine, cocaine, everything else. And because now all of a sudden, all these new conduits for getting things in were investigated with regards, and people were suddenly able to make money hand over fist. And I think that, California Department of Corrections did a piss poor job in planning for what this new black market was going to do for all kinds of things. And so, I wish that they'd been more proactive on, trying to stop those things. Because after all, we went ahead and, in the early 2000s, we added the big R to our patch there, rehabilitation. Well, what's rehabilitative about making it easy for inmates to score dope out on the yard? Nothing, So anyway, that just always kind of pissed me off, because if I, as a lowly CO, knew and could understand what this new policy was going to do, they should have been able to better handle it. And I just think that they were shit about doing it, in my opinion.
Yeah, and guys, I will say one thing let me just get rid of that comment here. I actually, when I remember getting being told, so this was for us, this may have been around 2011 or 2012. Wait, no, hold on. Let me think for a second. Maybe later than that, maybe 2012, 2013. But when we did it, and we let the population know months in advance, because this is not something that you make a decision the day before, then you try to implement, because that's enough for all the inmates to riot. Because again, one of the biggest concerns we have in corrections is that not all inmates are united, but you don't want to give them reasons to unite. So granted, I mean, you got gangs, of course, they could have some unity, like we just talked about earlier in the show with the Serenos, but also when you take things away, that's the biggest concern in corrections, taking stuff away. So when you were taking cigarettes away, that's not something you're going to wake up one morning and say, hey, by the way, we're done with cigarettes, implement that today. It's just, it's too much of a culture change, or it's just too much of a shock. And all the inmates now find a common cause. So I remember, you know, very strategically in how they did this. It was months in advance, which gave inmates a chance to kind of adjust, maybe kick the habit or find other ways to get it, unfortunately. But I will tell you this, when it became zero tolerant for it, so now the day is ended, now they're not supposed to have it. There were moments where it's like, okay, I see an inmate smoking. Should I chase after it right now? If it's too dangerous, you know what? I would be more strategic with it. So it's not like all of a sudden they're not allowed to have tobacco that I'm going gung ho after it. You know, I'm not going to be a fool and risk my life over it, but I am going to get it. But I'm going to get it when the advantage is on me, and not for the inmate to fight back. One more question before we come to an end, and I think this is a good one. From Correctional Officers of America, how do we prevent the jails and detention deputies from falling into the cracks regarding policies because they are forgotten by both the State Department of Corrections and their sheriff, who is a cop? So me and Russ talk about this all the time. We talk about, and I think it's definitely in most of my books, but I think I have something in the upcoming book. But obviously, the people that are invested in doing the job need to be involved with the process or the policies being created. You cannot leave them out of that process. And I find that to not just be disrespectful when they are left out of the process, but also it's dangerous, because they're the ones that are going to have to filter whatever changes are needed, and they're the ones that know how it should be done. I mean, we're developing systems right now that are trying to get staff to be more involved with the changes or innovations that are needed. But with that said, when there are concerns where staff are not involved in the policies because the higher ups are just dealing with the pressures from the outside, thinking that they know what to do better than we do, that's when I believe, you know, if possible, staff have to make a stand. And I'm not talking about making a stand where, you know, you're being insubordinate. I'm talking about documenting the efforts that are failing. You know, I mean, documentation carries a lot of weight, because documentation leads to liability and lawsuits. So I'm not saying, hey, Russ gives me an order one day and I'm going to just not do it. No, I'm talking about, okay, I'm going to do the order, because to some extent it's an ethical order, but be advised, this is the reason why this order could pose a threat. Now, mind you, guys, one last thing before I get Russ's perspective. The changes that are happening, obviously we have to move forward, but I think it's in the last book, but we talk about likelihood versus probability. Sometimes people, when they're resistant to change, safety and security becomes more of an excuse than a reason. You know, safety and security. It's like, well, yeah, but you know what? Does that really apply here? Well, the likelihood is not probable. Let me tell you something, guys. There's danger in every choice we make. There's always the likelihood of something happening. But likelihood shouldn't guide strategy as much as probability. Yes. So my biggest concern goes two ways. I talked about liability. Oh, it's in the book coming out. It's in the book. No, it's an article coming out for American Jail Association. It's an article coming out in the next magazine coming out, because Russ has a quote in it, and so does my boy Joe Paponio. Was that when we write policies, right, guys, the agency is usually deep in the liability of it all. So the outcome of the policy matters to the agency. What is it that we need to accomplish to protect us from being sued? Okay, so granted, the end result of the policy is the liability aspect, right? So we want to develop policies with that end result. But policy is different than procedure. Procedure gets us to the end result. So having said that, the fear of being sued should not creep into development of the policy, the procedure that gets us to the end game of the policy. So let me just mention something, and I'm going to pass it over to Russ. But I want you to bear with me on this one, guys. Sometimes we get so concerned with the fear of a lawsuit that lawsuit leaks into the procedures that must be developed. So now you got staff on the front line that know what the end result is, as well as the inmates, but they're confined because the liability creeped into the procedure instead of telling like the front line, hey, this is what we got to accomplish. This is the end result. What's the best route to take us there? So again, developed by the front line, the people that are doing the job. And then if their situations change, how best could discretion be employed so we can at least accomplish that end result? So I think the end game here is this. The liability of it all is the end result. What is that we have to accomplish to show that we're doing enough? Let's say Priya has the end result. We don't want inmates getting raped, and we don't want inmates being harassed, whatever it is. That's the end result. If that liability in the end result crosses into the procedure where every effort that Russ needs to take to get to that end result is dictated in the procedure, which doesn't give Russ a chance to maneuver, the inmates can then manipulate the policy, and that forces Russ to feel trapped. And then what happens is we wind up being controlled by the manipulation of the policy. So granted, I have written this book here, right? This helps you deal with manipulation through inmate interactions. There's nothing out there that is really out there for teaching us how to deal with if inmates are able to manipulate policy, how do you protect staff from, dealing with that manipulation? The best way is the very generalized advice is let the liability be the end game, but do not let the liability creep into the procedure to the point where we're trapped and we can't utilize discretion if it's being misused. Russ, what's your thought? And that's going to come out in an article I have coming up.
So I'm looking at and thinking of that more from an applied standpoint. I think that what administration should be doing is seeking a partnership. They should be looking at a way to get ideas on the table. They should be looking at a way to constantly do security reviews. And the way to do that, obviously, is to get people to buy into that process through leadership. And you know what? There should be a table of people that meet every week, and where anyone can come in and sit down and bring their concerns to the table, about security, about liability, about training, about equipment, about the condition of the physical plant, and everything else that goes along, because we are the experts in that. And so there has to be a buy-in. And I don't know specifically, where that disconnect is happening there in the state of Florida or whatever between the county and the state. It's something a little bit foreign to me, where we're very, 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 very separated and segregated entities here in California. But I think that people should be bringing that type of thought process forward. How can we actually improve? If we're just leaving it to administration, if we're just leaving it to the politicians and stuff, well, you can see how bad word we are here in California now. This state is completely bass backwards, and crime is off the hook. Where I work right now, the homeless encampment is right next to the jail. It's just absolutely bonkers here, and that's because of a lack of leadership. That's because of a lack of people trying to partner and trying to satisfy one specific subset of the population, which is the criminal element. and not working to try and bring safety and security to the citizens as a whole that are out there in the public. You should come to California and see how screwed up this is.
Yeah, and guys, in the end, as much as I mean, we try to be as specific as possible, but obviously, the magic of the application process has to come from the people that are asking the question, because everything pretty much varies from state to state. Hey, Russ, in your closing thought, because I know we're going to come to a close now, can you answer this one last question in your closing thought? This person was so nice, and they said, how do they ask a question? It's Patricia Mauser. And she may be from the outside looking in, because remember, I have a lot of followers from Duty Ron who are into true crime, and I wanted to get to her question. She says, if I go to prison, this is going to be a very generalized question, Russ, but again, maybe from the outside looking in. If I go to prison, how do I stay out of the hole, and how do I get along with my fellow inmates?
Okay, so the whole, of course, is what we refer to as administrative segregation. People that are put in administrative segregation is basically for two reasons. They're either a victim or they're a victimizer. I should say there are some other things that will get you in there, like an active investigation and, or importing dope, threats and some things like that. But mostly it's about, victims and victimizers. And so basically what you would not want to do is don't attack anybody, and make sure that you don't let anybody attack you. But I think that's the best that I can say. But except for, no, you should absolutely avoid prison at all costs, because if you're already worrying about how to stay out of administrative segregation, you are probably not wise enough in the ways of the world to be making prison your second home there.
Yeah, and I would say it's tough in prison because there's not really a full answer that's going to keep you out of things. Situations are situations, and sometimes they're out of your control. I mean, not every inmate, and I don't like the word whole because we know it's not that, but not every inmate is guilty when they find themselves there. It's just there's situations where we have to do our job. We act on universal precaution, and we sweep everybody up and let the hearing officer figure it out. But with that said, you don't want to put yourself in situations. But that doesn't mean situations can't find you. But having said that, there's really no catch-all there. And when it comes to inmates, you're not looking to belong. So I would be very wary of that, because if you're looking to kind of belong, you may have that want to belong supersede logic. At the end of the day, it's hard, because if you're on that other side of the coin, you got to be very wary who you connect to. Because remember, I want to mention something. Nice is surface and manipulative. Kind, maybe a little bit more from the heart, but it's very hard to tell the difference between the two, because these inmates could be masters at being nice, and they could manipulate you. Or so I don't know. I mean, that's a very tough question. I would just say try your best to remain you. Don't change. And I would spend more of my focus on the outside, because the last thing you want to do is make friends with the wrong person on the inside, and then you're bringing that shit home with you, because it doesn't end there. Yeah. So every choice you make in prison, who you connect with, whatever it is, could eventually affect you on the outside. Hey, Rush, everything you'd like to say in closing, sir?
Yes, I do. This has been an amazing little show that I think that we've done for you tonight. Just, hey, tell a friend, share this out, share other things. I probably should have done it at the beginning, Danger Russ Hamilton at substack.com. That's my Substack. I've been getting, hundreds and hundreds of views on that as of late, and that's very much appreciated. It's one of the things that we use to bolster both Tier Talk and Keepers of Chaos. And, finding out more about, being in this profession is always welcome. We really cater especially to the line staff here. And I think that's a great thing. But also, if you're just curious about corrections in any aspect, Anthony, Joe, we're all very accessible. We love doing this stuff. And so anyway, cheers to y'all. Everyone out there walking that line, man, stay safe. Keep your head on a swivel. Don't let complacency bite you in the ass as it has some other places around here.
Yeah, and you'll find that we have an article on that too, where Russ has a quote in that. Hey, guys, just in closing for me, don't forget, guys, I have the books on the market, Inmate Manipulation Decoded, links in the description. This book's already out, published by Blue 360 Media, and this one is the pre-order. I'll also link to that in the description. This will be out by the end of the month. A lot of the stuff here doesn't just apply to corrections. Believe it or not, it could apply to the real world. And I will say this, guys, for anybody working in the profession, have value in what you do, basically just, this is great work you do, regardless of, what anybody else may think. We can't push for a positive belief in this profession if you yourself don't believe it's positive. Patricia Mauser's asking if she could join the Facebook page. I think I would message Russ first, because if you're not from corrections, I think that is specifically if you're working in corrections. But with that said, Patricia, if you have
I make exceptions.
We do make exceptions. And also, if you have any questions, you could also email us directly, gangianthony@yahoo.com. And what do you got, Russ?
Custoslupi@gmail.com. CUSTOSLUPI means keeper of wolves.
Yeah. And so, Grant, if you want to message Russ Hamilton on Facebook first, he could get you into the group, or you could always email us and we can talk to you directly. As always, guys, stay safe. The show is here. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. The bell's going to notify you every time I do a video. And guys, here's my goal with my 20 people here. I want to get another 75 more thousand. I'm over 25,000, but I want to get to 100 grand because I want to see if YouTube is going to give me a silver plaque just to see if they support my message. They won't let me monetize, but I would love to say, YouTube, thank you for supporting me and Russ's talk about the criminal justice system. As always, guys, stay safe. Love you.